Hello everybody, my name is Jordane Grenat. Today I will talk to you about JavaScript and more specifically how you deal with your asynchronous code in JavaScript since the new features brought by ES6, ES7 and later on. So a quick presentation, my name is Jordane Grenat. I'm a French web developer, so I'm a French cliché, I love wine, cheese and snails. I work at a great company, Viseo, and I'm working with Node.js, JavaScript generally, and Java. Okay, another thing about me is that I love TV shows. I watch so many TV shows, I can't even keep track of everything I need to watch. So I have a website called Beta Series that helps me to keep track of the episode I need to see. And I've built a small dashboard with the API of this website for this talk. So let's have a look. Right here on the upper left, you can see my profile with some statistics. Just below, you have a list of my friends, some stats also. And on the right part, you have a randomly picked TV show amongst the one I'm watching. So please, if there's something shameful that pop up, just don't tell my friends. So let's have a look at the source code. Okay, so we have basically two files. This one is a file that contains some utility function to call the API. So you can see the function used to authenticate to the API. First thing we can see is that we have a callback. Traditionally in JavaScript, we are using callback to handle asynchronous calls. Once the data is retrieved, right here, we are calling the callback with the data. And if there is an error, we are calling the callback with an error. There are some other utility functions to retrieve my user information, the character of the show, and my friends. Okay, so the other files, at the top of the file, you have some utility function only to display the dashboard. Right here, you have an interesting function used to display my friends. We'll come back to that later. And at the end of the file, we have all the code that authenticate the user, get my information, the show characters, and the friends. First thing we can notice is right at the end, we have a lot of closing brackets. It is a symptom of what is called in JavaScript callback hell. What is callback hell? When you're dealing with asynchronous operation with JavaScript, with callbacks, usually you will find yourself nesting more and more dependent calls, and you will have a lot of indent. It's not really readable. You can't understand what this code does at first sight. So that's not really nice. We will try to make it better. Another thing we can notice right here is that we have a lot of error management, and we're basically doing always the same thing, just displaying the error and then stopping the execution. It would be nice if we could handle everything at the same place. So that's what we will try to do. The first tool we will use was brought to us in ES6. It's called promise. What is a promise? A promise is an asynchronous value wrapped into an object. This object can have three states. A pending state, waiting for resolution. It can be resolved with success or resolved with an error. Right here, my async call returns a promise, and we can consume the data once it's retrieved with the then method. So you pass it a function that takes one argument, the data retrieved, and if there is an error, you can get it and consume it with the catch method. How do you declare a promise? Simply with the promise global object you're using as a constructor, you pass it a function that takes two arguments, a result function and a reject function. So right here, as you can see, after making our asynchronous call with a callback, we can either reject or resolve our promise. So let's try that into our code base. Right here, we go to the authenticate user, and now what we want is returning a promise. Just before that, I will keep the callback, just make it optional to be sure our code continue working while we are transforming it. So the callback is optional. Now we need to return a promise. Pay attention, sometimes I code really fast, right here. So we will nest all that code inside, and now we need to resolve the promise when it needs to be resolved. So right here, we will resolve the promise with the same data than before. And right below, we want to reject it because there was an error. Okay, let's just check we haven't broken anything. Okay, perfect. We won't transform the other method because I've already done the work to gain a little bit of time. As you can see, we're already returning some promise. So now let's go back to our source, to other file. Now what we want to do is begin to consume this promise. So first, we don't need that callback anymore. So let's put it aside. Now what we have right here is an expression that returns the promise, so we can consume it directly. Oops. So let's use the then method. We're taking a friends array as argument, and we can do the same thing than before, displaying the friend. Don't forget to handle the errors, and we can remove all these lines. Okay, first thing we can notice is that our code is a little bit more compact. That's nice. Let's continue with that code. So once again, we don't need the callback anymore. Let's consume the promise, taking a characters array as an argument, and just displaying them. And handling the error. Okay. More compact, nice. Let's continue. We have another code right here. Let's consume that, taking user info, using lambda. Okay, now we will put all that code inside. Okay, don't forget to handle any potential error. Nice. A last call, quickly. Okay. And we don't need that, and just catch the error. So let's just check everything is working. Yeah, perfect. So now we're using promises. As you can see, the code is a lot more concise, but we still have a lot of indent. That's not really nice. Maybe we can do something about that. Something a few people seem to know about promise is that when you're using the then method, what you get in return is another promise, always. It's the same for the catch method. So you can chain your code. You can chain several then to transform your data. What is so special about that is that, for example, here we're returning only a few parts of our data, the user, and at the second then call, we are expecting to get only the user. This is exactly what happens when you chain promise. The data you return is then the argument of the next call. But what happens if you return a promise instead of a raw value? For example, here we're returning the get user async call that returns the promise. What happens is that the code waits for that promise to be resolved, and once it's resolved, it will call your next call with the resolved value. Here's the user. So you can chain asynchronous calls without using more indents than before. Okay, let's use that. right here, we have this call. We can just return it instead of consuming it right here. So let's just close that, and we can reduce the indent right here. Another thing we can notice is that we have two consecutive catch. It's useless, it's redundant, so we can just remove that one. That's better. Now we have less indent. Let's have a look to the other function I told you about earlier, the Displacement Function. What does she do? It takes a friends array as argument, and for each of these friends, it will make an asynchronous call right here. Each time a response comes, we will push that friend into an array, declare at the top of the function, and we will call the done function. What is the done function? It's a little trick when you have, like here, many parallel calls and you want to do something once you've retrieved everything. It's a function that after a certain amount of calls will call your true callback, here the render friend function. It's not pretty at all, it's really dirty. And the code is not readable. You can't understand what it does directly. So maybe the promise will help us again. Exactly. We have another method inside the promise object, the promise.all, that takes an array of promise as argument, and then returns the promise that is resolved when all the promises into the array are resolved. So for example, here the data variable will contain at index 0 the resolved value of promise 1, and at index 1 you will have the resolved value of promise 2. This is perfect. So we don't need this callback anymore. Now we need some promise. That's perfect because this call returns a promise, so we just need to map our friends into some promise. Let's store it. Okay, now we can use promise.all with this array of promise and directly get the friends and call our function directly with those friends. Don't forget to handle any potential error. So the render friend function now takes one argument here, and we don't need the friends info array. So this code is useless as a friends info array and the done function also. So now it's really more concise, more readable. We can still do better. Right here, as you can see, the display friends function is called right here. And just after that, we are already handling any potential error. So here, we don't even need to catch the error, because if you return that promise, it will be managed right here. In fact, if these two parallel calls, we decide to use promise.all with them, right here, and right here, we can remove one of these lines, and if you return that promise, we can even remove that one because it's already handled right here. Okay, nice. Now you have only one place where we are handling with errors. That's perfect. But I told you our code will look synchronous. Does it look synchronous for you? Not for me. So let's see another thing. I think we've done everything we could with the promise. So let's see another feature of ES6, which is called the generators. What is a generator? A generator is a function declared with an asterisk. It's a function that can stop its execution in the middle of it and be resumed later. So for example, you have access to a new keyword, the yell keyword, That means basically, okay, I'm done with my execution for now. I return you a value. For example, here it's the value 1. And call me later if you want me to continue. If you call this generator a second time, it will execute this statement, return the value 2, and stop its execution. So how do you consume it? You call a first time my generator to create an iterator, and then you have access inside its iterator to the next method that will start the execution, get in return the value at the first yield. Here it's 1, and then if you call it again, it will return you the value 2. What happens if you call it a third time? Right here, it will return you this object with the done boolean to true and the value undefined. Okay, it's not really useful to deal with the synchronous operation, but one thing we know is that we can communicate with the generator the same way it can return us a value. We can give it some value. At the first line of the generator, you can see we're yielding the value 1, and we seem to wait for something in return. After that, we yield the value 2, and then we yield the value we are supposed to have received. So let's see how it works. So at the first next, it will execute the first yield, and then the second next, we will give it a value, here the string hello, that will be transmitted inside our generator as the result of the yield statement. So after that, it displays our value. It also works with errors. You can send exception inside a generator. So right here, we're yielding the value 1, and maybe there will be an exception. So we have surrounded this by a try catch. And if you want to throw an exception into a generator, you just use iterator.throw method with whatever you want to throw inside the generator. So it will just do something like that. Okay. What happens if instead of returning a raw value, you decide to yield a promise, like here? If we decide to yield a promise, and we're expecting the consumer to only call us back when the promise is resolved, with the result value, we will get something that looks really synchronous, if you have a look. So how does it work? We are creating an iterator. Then we are receiving a promise from the first execution. Then we are just waiting for that promise to be resolved, or for it to have an error, to call the iterator.next with the return value. This is exactly what we will do to have a code that looks synchronous. This is so useful that, in fact, you don't have to call your generator yourself. There are a lot of libraries on NPM that does the work. For example, we will be using co. So you just give your generator as a parameter to co, and it will execute. It will start to iterate over your generator. Each time it will receive a promise, it will wait for it to be resolved. And then it will call back your generator with the result value, or throw an exception if there was an exception. So let's use co inside our project. I've already installed it, so let's just import that. Okay. Now we need to pass an anonymous generator to the co function, and we can just put all of our code inside. Okay. It's been a long time since the last time we checked. Oh yeah, something I've forgotten. Right here. Okay, something is missing. Okay, I forgot to return that promise. Okay. Better, we still have an error. The user data is not defined. if you just have a look right here, we're expecting to have the user data, but now it's not in the same scope. So we need a little trick just here. Instead of returning just the user info, we'll return an object with both the user data and user info. And here we're getting both of them. So it's working. Okay, so now basically what has changed is only that our code is called by the co library, but nothing has really changed. Now we can start yielding some promise right here. Just yield that promise, expect user data in return, and we can reduce some indent right here. And now we have what seems to be a synchronous call, and it's perfectly working. So we don't even need this little trick because the user data is in the same scope. So let's remove that. Okay, still working. Now we can yield another one, this one for example. Expect user info in return. Okay, and everything is working. Nice. We haven't managed the errors, so two way of doing that. Either you're doing a try-catch block right here. It will work because co throws you an error when there is an error. Or you can just know that co returns a promise and just catch the error at the end of your code. It seems better. Okay. This is so useful, in fact, that some people wanted it to be added to the specification, the JS specification. And it's now done since a few weeks, and it's called async functions. Basically, it's exactly what I've just showed you. Instead of declaring a generator, you're declaring an async function with an async keyword. And then instead of yielding your values, you will use the keyword await. But it's the same behavior behind the scene. Okay, let's use that. So it's now done, completely safe to use. It will be in the ES 2017 specification next year. So you can use it with Babel. It's totally safe. Okay, let's remove this generator, create an async function instead. The only thing that will change is that we need to call that function right here. Add something. Oh yeah, I need to replace the yield by the await keyword right here. Okay, so now we have a code that looks really synchronous while performing everything asynchronously. One thing you can be tempted to do right here is doing some bad things, really bad things. Instead of using promise.all right here to make your parallel calls, you can be tempted to use a wait on the two calls, but just be aware that here you're doing two consecutive calls instead of two parallel calls, so you're losing some time. So everything can look like a nail when you have a hammer, but just be careful. Okay, thank you. I have a few links. The slides are available on Surge at this URL. I have some links about promise and generators. And one subject I couldn't cover because it's really too short is reactive programming. In fact, with promise, you only deal with use case where you have one call to your callback. if you're waiting many calls, like when you're listening some events, you will need something else. It could be observables. So just have a look to reactive programming by Andre Medeiros. It will introduce you to observables in JavaScript. Thank you.